Hi, welcome to today's episode of Speak Greasy at Mac Street Kitchen. Our guest today is a firm favorite of MasterChef Australia and has delighted her Indian fans with many restaurants in Bombay and Goa. She's back in India to launch what's no doubt going to be a hot commodity. I'm super excited because I have an old friend here. We've met on and off for, 7-8 years now. And it's so great to have you here, Sarah. Welcome to Mac Street Kitchen. I think it was 6 years ago. Not in Goa, not in Australia, not in Bombay, but we hung out in Chennai, of all places. And went on this crazy city tour and ate our way through the city.
So good.
And back in Jan 2017, and I think that's when we really hung out a bit crazy.
I know.
But it's so great to have you here today, and welcome back to Mumbai.
Thank you. It feels like it's like coming home. I'm like, sorry. It's such a good feeling, and I think for me, it's like India feels like home. And I think when we had that trip and such good memories and experiences, and to think that I've known you for 6 years and spend good quality time here in India feels like, I don't know, it's a strange feeling because then, COVID hit. I was in Australia for a couple of years, and then now coming back, it's like everything feels so good to be back. Yeah, I can't stay away. But it was weird because, I was forced to stay in Australia where I hadn't been, I think, a month without being to India. 8 years I was coming back to India. So I was back and forth every month. So that was just my normal routine. So in the beginning I had withdrawals. I was like, dude, I can't handle this. It's so quiet. And then I got used to that, being back in Australia. So now coming back, I'm like, this is what I've been missing.
It's great, to have that where you just pick up where you left off. And I think that's the fun bit about the F&B fraternity. But I'm going to actually dial it back a little bit because, you started life as with a modeling career, and then you ended up at MasterChef Australia. Please tell me how that happened. I mean, I thought my pivot from accounting and tax to restauranting was weird enough. But,
I wish it was a pivot from accounting. That would help me out a little bit in the business world. But honestly, it is a bit of an oxymoron, but I think I was really lucky. I'm from a small town of 2,000 people in Australia, which I'm sure it's probably this building.
Yeah.
So for me, I wasn't exposed to a lot of, different cultures or foods or cuisines. And I was kind of discovered at a young age around 17, 18 years old. And that kind of took me around the world. And I got to, my first country I went to was Germany and in Hamburg. So it's, nobody speaks English. So for me, I was kind of really quickly exposed to a really strong culture and had to kind of get used to, figuring things out at a really young age. So I still remember this one dish where I honestly have no idea the name of the dish, but they made this warm cucumber and dill soup. And I was just like, warm cucumber and dill, it just doesn't make sense in your mind. But the nostalgia with that dish and the taste of it, it was so beautiful. And it was just something that I'd never had before. And it just really, weren't able to communicate in English, but it's like this dish connected us sitting around the table, just made me realize how powerful food is. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where kind of the passion started to come into play. And
were you just did you just cook a lot at home, and, sort of how did you make that sort of plunge into, entering a professional sort of competition?
Yeah. So, my mum is a single mom, 3 children, but every night she would cook dinner for us. We'd sit around the table at 6:30 p.m. without fail. And we didn't have a lot of money growing up. My mum, worked really hard to give us what we had. But the one thing she used to do was every Christmas or special occasion, she would, for Christmas, she'd bake jars of cookies for every single family member. So we would spend days doing it. We have a big family, by the way. And then, birthdays and different parties, she'd always make a pavlova and all these, desserts. So everybody loved it. It was honestly it shows that it's not about money. It's about that thought behind the gift. And there was one year she didn't give the cookies and everyone was like, that's our favorite gift. What are you doing? So you can spend all this money, but it's that connection to food. So I I grew up making this with my mom, and when I started cooking, I was obsessed with, baking and sweets and that side of cooking. And it wasn't really until my son was born and being exposed to the Punjabi kind of culture, and like I just, that art of like throwing things into a pot and, going from learning pastry and sweets where it's like very technical to jumping into like who knows how much of what you learn,
kind of thing.
a feeling of love and all of that. And when I started cooking kind of, Indian dishes, like you had to experiment, you had to play around with, what you're putting into the dish. So I started to get a real passion for it. So then, still working while I was, pregnant, and when I had my son, I was cooking 3-course meals like every day, totally obsessed. And we ended up moving to London for modeling again for my work. And we lived with my son's family. And I decided one day, I was just like, modeling's just not fulfilling me anymore. I got to an age, my son was born. I just felt like I wanted to be doing something that I was proud of, that I was inspired by. And if I'm leaving him to work, which I had to, I wanted to be fueling the soul.
Yeah.
So there was one day I was like, okay, I'm giving myself 1 year. I'm going to stop modeling for 1 year, go to Le Cordon Bleu. And I started studying there. I, was like topping my class. I was totally obsessed, and I'd be bringing home these, beautiful dishes, and then it'd be the fight, like the Indian, keema or aloo gobi to get to the table. This like bouillabaisse, like, and it's just like everyone took the Indian food. And I was like, what the hell's going on? Like I'm studying all year for this, and I guess it's just like that's when like my true passion, and I'm sure like through what you've had all your kind of ups and changes through your career, that you start to learn what your passion is specifically. Like you can take influences from different things that you experience, but it's that moment when you start to really realize your own cooking style that I think the passion really kind of comes alive. And I just remember being really cold in London one time, and
I completely get that. I empathize completely.
And I was like, if I get into MasterChef, can we go back to Australia?
Because it was like, oh, it's like so unlikely. You just said that at that thing, and then it happened.
And I got in, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm
going back to Australia.
Going back in. And so, we did the move, and
it's amazing.
And I had no idea that MasterChef Australia was so big in India. I didn't know it aired in India.
So, I have to tell you something. I mean, we're sitting in Mac Street Kitchen today, and it was around the same time that we started conceptualizing this, which was 2014. And a big part of what inspired the design of this space was MasterChef Australia, where
I just got goosebumps.
It was a time when people were like genuinely addicted to the show, and people, were starting to like cook and try things and experiment, and we're just getting like, the food shows were just becoming like a really big thing. And we just felt like, okay, if we're going to create a space, like do one where people can actually, since there is this growing interest in cooking and hands-on cooking, professional cooking, like create a space where people can come and do that. Because, whatever, 8-9 years ago, Bombay didn't really have that kind of a setup. And, but it was really very much driven by MasterChef Australia. Like, it wasn't even India, because that, I think, came a lot later. But that show, and I think even till date, I think holds the sort of, benchmark for all the MasterChef, shows around the world. But that really like catapulted you into the F&B world, I think, truly and, professionally. After that, I remember going back to that Chennai trip for a second. I remember like we were walking around a temple trying to be all pious, and then you got like attacked by a lot of elderly people. I remember who were just like, oh my God, and I was like, they watch MasterChef? That's amazing. It's like crazy the following that show has. So
it's huge. And it's really, I think it's great because it's a really inspirational show. I think there's so many reality TV shows out there, and this is the show that you want your kids to be watching to get inspiration. And I still remember on my first trip, before our Chennai trip, but what you created here was one of the first places that I was told to come and visit, and that's how we met in the early days. And it's just for you to think of such an incredible concept and take the risk, because there was nothing like that here at that time. It's not easy to be a person that is kind of making changes in a culture that's very rich and old and amazing. So
I think we both have that crazy gene or streak in us clearly to do those things that you don't expect. And
it's true.
But yeah, and it's amazing. So after that, you kind of started spending more time in India, and you ventured into opening a restaurant in Goa and then in Mumbai. Tell us a little bit, in terms of, obviously, you talked about how you moved from like baking and pastry to cuisine and then, opening restaurants. I mean, that's pretty scary, opening a restaurant, I think. I mean, I still get sort of jitters doing it after all these years. And you were coming from a completely different culture, from a food perspective. Let's start with that. What was that process like? Like, what did you bring from Australia to India?
So in the early days, it was pretty challenging in terms of the food because I hadn't spent enough time traveling around India. So I created a menu when I was in Australia and I was young, I was like 25, 26 something years old, and I hadn't had a lot of experience. I'd worked in restaurants, I had managed restaurants, but I'd never like developed menus. So when I created my menu, I spent a lot of time researching and trialing in Australia, and I landed in Goa and I was just like, this is not going to work. It's just not going to work because it's so much about, appreciating the land that is around you. It's understanding what produce is amazing. It's understanding the palate. And, there's all these comments about Australianizing or Indianizing or, to the palate that you are. But it's actually quite important because like my palate has actually changed because I do eat a lot of spices and flavorful food. So I go to some restaurants and I'm like, I actually can't eat this. Like, it's your palate does, it is influenced by what you eat and what you grow up eating. So in the early days, it was a lot of trial and error. And when I had that menu, I completely tore it up. Like, I started again. So I spent a month kind of traveling around Goa, trialing, tasting all the local cuisine, cooking with the locals. And then I started to bring that influence into my cooking. And then, it was a journey for me to get to a place of what is my style then, because, I love these flavors, but when you're young at your craft, it takes time to have the confidence, like you said, to put yourself out there. And I think the dishes where I experimented the most, which ended up being the most popular, were the ones that are like I almost cry taking it to the table because it's you. Yeah. Right? Like, it's you on a
You're
plate.
putting yourself out there. It is pretty scary.
Scary.
I'm not a chef and I can't cook. I have like no desire to cook. But, I've worked with a lot of chefs and a lot of sort of, foreign chefs who've been part of our team. And the biggest sort of challenge for us is, firstly, getting them to understand the Indian palate. I mean, working with the ingredients is something that, everyone has to do with what's locally available. But just understanding, and it's such an integral part of, you can't just come and say, well, this is me and I'm gonna kind of put this, take it or leave it. I think it's something where you have to appreciate, what the local flavors are, nuances are, and then, still manage to bring some part of your identity to it. And it's easier said than done. I mean, and it is pretty scary. I mean, I've worked enough with chefs to know that putting yourself out there is, and people can be brutal with feedback, as we all know. And it is something that is very personal.
Yes, it is. And I've always been a very shy person, which is weird because, all the stuff that I do these days, but growing up, I've always been very shy. So for me to do that, it was a lot to get myself out there. But then, as you start to cook for more and more people and as more and more people come and dine and you get their feedback, and I don't ask for feedback. I watch. I look at the plate, what is left on the plate, what, their reactions on their face. And I think, people won't necessarily tell you exactly how they feel because they might not even exactly know, right? Like how to articulate what they don't like about the dish. Yeah. So then you start to, understand that side of it. And I think now to like today, I really do understand the Indian palate, and it's something that I've through trial and error and 10 years working in India and a lot of pop-ups and different things as well. And whenever talking with chefs, it's like, look, it's fine, I've got this. Like, the chat where it's like an international chef coming in, they're like, let me introduce you to, like, I've got this, it's okay, don't worry.
What did you take back from India this time to your cooking there?
So Australian Open was the first dinner that I did back in Australia. So it was their chef series. It's like, Angela Hartnett and all these top chefs globally have done it in Australia. So getting that opportunity, I was blown away. And I just, because my cooking style is unique now. Like I mostly use French techniques, Indian flavors coming into my dishes. And this was the first dinner. So I was again nervous to do this. And like I had one lady stand up like with like tears in her eyes, like hug me and be like, your mum must be so proud. And I'm like, oh, she is. But like, I don't know. I just like, it just gave me this certain sort of ease. And now my cooking style doesn't change where I am because now there's flavor and there's enough like, of my own kind of style coming through that the dishes are the same. Like the dishes I did for the Australian Open, I do the same style now when I do pop-ups here and everyone's loving the flavors.
Amazing. So you've created your identity, using a confluence of both.
Exactly.
Food styles, cultures, all of that.
And I think that's kind of the direction that we're going. Like now everywhere's so multicultural. Like Australia, Melbourne in particular has the biggest Indian community per capita outside of India in the world. So we have, Indian influences, Chinese influence, Vietnamese, South American, but a big Indian population. And like it all is coming together now. So we get a little bit of everything. And
so it's not like, it's not flavors that people are unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
Which is great.
People are starting to love bolder flavors now. And, you see an Australian menu and it's like one's got an Indian influence, one's got Vietnamese, one's got South American. And it's like that is Australian now.
Yeah.
So I think we're lucky in terms of Australia to have all of these influences coming together and people do really great things from all over the world.
I think it's getting closer in terms of just because of the cross-pollination of people, of like now food, culture, like, this is truly globalization, right?
Yeah.
And we're seeing it from the perspective, from the lens of food. But it's definitely, I think it's happening in India as well.
Absolutely.
Like, the idea of a globally inspired menu or a cuisine agnostic menu because it's taking inspiration from everywhere is actually what most restaurants are leaning towards because it gives you freedom to really do
your own style. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that India is just growing in such an extremely fast pace. Like even just these couple of years of me being away, I'm like, oh, wow. Like
the amount that's coming, like homegrown brands, right?
Yes.
From everything from like chocolate to cheese to like spirits to, everything that you're not having to like look abroad and you feel like you've got something that is truly Indian, that is something to be proud of, and that's happening. And I think I'm definitely seeing that change.
And high quality, and I think being proud of using homegrown ingredients, where it was like kind of before exciting to use international ingredients. It's like come back to home and be proud of that. And I think it's a really good time in India at the moment to embrace all of that.
I mean, speaking of ingredients, so I went on my maiden trip to Australia, about 6 months ago, and I was blown away. Just really came back feeling, amazed and very inspired by, what's happening there. And
there's always been that connection. I think through MasterChef, cricket, and all of these quite significant connections that it's just following through. And I think it's nice. Like, I think it's a nice marriage between the two countries. And I think both looking towards each other to build it a little bit further. And 100%. I think it's a good time for sure.
Just going back to sort of you creating restaurants here, I get asked this a lot as a sort of, woman restaurateur. And I hate using that term because I'm like, that is what I am. I don't know otherwise. But, did you feel at any point that it sort of added to your challenge in, what was already something new for you to do, like just in terms of being a foreigner and then also a woman?
It never put me off. I'm a person that likes a challenge. So for me, it's like it gives me a little bit of extra fire. It was definitely there. I mean, you can tell it in a lot of situations. I still see it today and happening, everywhere around, whether it be in Australia or in India, it still does happen. I think I faced it a lot of times, like going from being a model into being, a chef. Like it's a big transition, whether you're a female or what. In my early days, be it in MasterChef, I was out to prove myself. I didn't want to do, I didn't do any television show until after I, had started working on the restaurant. Like I wanted to prove myself first. And that was my job. And I think whatever your craft is, you need to be at the top of your craft and you need to put in the hours and the work, and that takes time. And I was dedicated to doing that. And I think there were challenges along the way, but I think no harder than the ones that I was already facing in different aspects of, life. And happens in all industries. It's not just as a chef or, you know, as a restaurateur. But yeah, I think it's more about putting in the hard work, and you have to. I think a lot of people think that, especially coming out of like a show like MasterChef, that things kind of get handed on a silver platter. It doesn't work like that in any industry. Opening a restaurant is hard work. And if you're a female or a male, it's all the same. Like it's very difficult. And there's so much that goes behind the scenes that I think people don't really see. And I think I was lucky that my restaurant in India show happened because you saw it. You saw me building the restaurant.
The real stuff. You can't make that.
Exactly. Yes. So that was kind of almost a bit of a turning point, I think, in the way that people saw me, because they saw that it was me doing it. And, you know, obviously with the team and people around me and a lot of help along the way, but I was in there getting dirty, doing, you know, being involved in everything. And I think that's important for success, is to understand all aspects. And language barrier, like I feel really lucky that, you know, this is not my culture or country or language, that I was accepted and able to work here, because ultimately I should be the one learning Hindi, not the other way around, which I've been trying.
Yeah.
Twitter. So,
well, you've got another feather in your hat now with this amazing range of sauces.
Yes.
Listen, I have the spice threshold of a baby, so I'm not. It's one here to you.
Really? Is that the baby level?
Is that the one with the eggs, like all the way to the?
It is. It is.
But yeah, Hot Toddy, a very cool name. Clearly, you know, an ode to your time in Goa.
Yes.
Or at least that's what I thought.
So many layers to it. It's like the Toddy, you know, the drink. It's the, you know, my last name as well, and spice as well.
Oh my God. I'm so thick. It's the heat. Okay. Put it down.
Toddy as well. And that's the thing in Goa. Like I actually,
I did not
when
get that. I can't believe I just said Goa. That's just like the last
I
thing.
climbed the coconut trees and like got this sap from the, you know, the coconut trees and made toddy vinegar, and maybe that's when the name came up.
But listen, tell us more. Like, how did this happen? Is this a COVID baby or?
It is. Yeah. So I was actually, it was like, I've always loved chilies. Like I'm that person that when I'm eating my dinner, I'll have a raw Indian green chili on the side, bite, seeds and all, and I'm obsessed. But what I found with India is that not all chilies are the same. So you have the Kashmiri chili, it's that more mild kind of heat, but it's all about the flavor, and then all the way up to the Bhat Jolokia in the Ghost as well. But it was a really funny story, actually. So I was start of COVID, George Calombaris rings me up and he was like, Sarah, I need Kashmiri chili, like a base, like a sauce for my curry that I'm making. He's like, where can I buy it? And I was like, I can make it. I have everything in my pantry right now. Like, we're full lockdowns. So I made it up for him, sent it across in like a delivery to his house. And then he's gone on Instagram and he's doing this like cooking demonstration. And he's like, look, I've got this sauce, you know, my good friend Sarah Todd made it. You can go and message. I have no idea what's in it. Go message her and ask her for the recipe. And I didn't watch it. I didn't see this. And I get all these tons and tons of messages on my Instagram going, where can I buy the sauce? Where can I buy it? And I was like, what is going on? Like, it's crazy. My brother is a massive foodie wants to move into this space as well. And I was like, he's like, I want to do something. I was like, I have this idea. And it just kind of started, and like crazy. It took 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Like first of all, the flavors, like I think it's really important to, for me, I really wanted to make sure the chili flavor is coming through. And with these chilies like the Bhat Jolokia and things like that, it's hard to bring any other flavor in because they're so hot. So it's finding that balance with all the sauces. And the tagline is kind of taste the world one chili at a time. So we've got an Aussie-inspired one with the burnt eye mango, and then a Thai, and, want to kind of keep exploring the different chilies and that side of it. But like you, being a bit of a perfectionist as well, like wanted to make sure that they're sauces that can sit pride and place on your table. So it's, the bottles, we wanted to make sure we had a really beautiful like shaped bottle that, if you have
it's very unusual, I have to say.
Yeah. So we got it in Italian glass maker, and it's that whole like process of like everyone we call, no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. No. I'm like, I don't care. I'm making this happen. I'm like, we're not making this if it's just, like
second best.
Yeah. It can't be. We want it to be like standing out, looking beautiful. And I think the last few years, people want quality now. They don't want just something that's, not quite there. They will take the time to spend, a little bit more time finding quality products and something that's a bit more premium. Like they're all natural, they're vegan, gluten-free, no colors or artificial flavors. And I think, we all want to focus on health, but we want to eat good food.
Where and when can people get their hands on this?
So they're available in India now, online at the moment, but through the next 6-12 months, they'll be available in all the different stores and sort of start rolling out over the next little while. And my website as well, sarahtodd.com.au.
Yeah.
And it's all available now in India. So it's shipped from India, which is really something that I wanted to happen. And, when I was creating the range, I definitely had my Indian family in mind when I was creating it as well.
But listen, congratulations. This is fantastic. And, I think I'm sure it's going to be a huge hit in India because Indians do love their condiments. Yes, they love their condiments, but they love their spice as well. So that's amazing. And do you actually have time for anything more? Are you still some of them more on the horizon, or?
Well, I mean, I think during that kind of break where the restaurants shut, during COVID, and had that time to kind of rethink about what I was doing, like the burning passion of my next restaurant just I was like,
boss,
I know.
You gotta get out of jail, Todd, and you're like, no, I want to go right back in.
I know. It's like there's something about the industry. It's like it's so damn addictive. Yeah. So I just miss it. It's interacting.
That's exciting. So is it going to be in Australia or in India? Can you tell us?
That is it's something that proactively I'm working on now. So it's definitely. But, getting this baby off the ground and all of that, but I don't know, I just miss it.
Well, we are going to stay tuned for that one. Hopefully we'll hear more about that very soon.
Yeah.
But listen, good luck and all the very best with all these cool things you're doing and whatever's coming up for you as well. And hopefully see you a lot more in India.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be lots more street food tours coming up in random cities.
Yeah. We look forward to that. And yes, thank you again. So
awesome. Thank you.